Listen, it is almost admirable how brilliantly the economic system we all live in has utilized each and every one of us to rig the system against all of us. Let me explain. 70% of Americans own their own home. 60% of Americans have no investments other than their home and maybe a retirement account like a 401k or a Roth IRA. 1/4 of Americans have no investments at all. First, let's talk about that 70%. When we talk about things like home affordability, there's really only two options. Either home prices can come down or wages can go up. Now, if 60% of Americans have no other savings besides their home and retirement accounts, and 70% of Americans own a home, by bringing home prices down, you would destroy the savings of nearly 3 out of 4 Americans. But because real estate has been such an amazing investment vehicle, and the average homeowner has a net worth 40 times higher than the average renter, not only would you be destroying the savings of most of Americans, but you'd also have to convince the majority and wealthiest Americans to go against their own interests. Now let's talk about the 60%. This is the majority of Americans who have no investments outside of their home and retirement accounts. And do you know who manages those retirement accounts? BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, Bank of America, the big investment banks who own nearly everything in America. And we all, as individuals, want lower interest rates because a lower interest rate means that I can buy a bigger house for less monthly. I can live in a nicer neighborhood for less monthly. And the high interest rates that we've been dealing with have been really stifling people's ability to move to where they want to live. Unfortunately, the way we get these low interest rates is that our Federal Reserve prints money out of thin air to buy bonds, and by decreasing the amount of bonds available, they decrease the interest rate. The effect of printing this money is that everything becomes more expensive. We all have heard a grandparent say, back in my day, a gallon of gas costs a nickel. We all know that candy bars used to be 79 cents and now they're $2. We see house prices going up. And the reality is that the value of these things is not going up. It's the value of your dollar going down. And the reason that I brought up BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, and these other investment banks is they all own the controlling stakes in the corporations that you work for. So if bringing home prices down would destroy the savings of the majority of Americans, and another 1/4 of Americans have no savings at all, and you can't save in dollars, you can't save in your bank account because the government gradually devalues the money that sits there, and 60% of Americans work for large corporations owned by these investment companies who have no incentive to raise wages to match the increase in home prices, let alone to cover the gap we've had growing since 1971 for these home prices. And to compete with any of these large corporations is very expensive when they can hire cheaper labor and get things for less so they can charge less and spend less. What are we to do? Well, I'll tell you what we have to do. What we need is a way to save that is outside of the control and outside of the subsidy of the government and of the investment banks. What we need is a sound money, because we can look at the examples of Venezuela and Argentina, of Zimbabwe and Sudan and Turkey, so many other countries that have gone down this path of printing money and government subsidy, and it has always led to the same conclusion. Now, the reason that the United States has lasted in such prosperity for so long while doing this is because after World War II, we effectively negotiated a way to export all of our inflation to other countries. We forced them to use our dollar as a way to trade. So the amount of inflation that we've got is drastically lower than it should be if we weren't exporting dollars to the rest of the world. I became a realtor almost a decade ago because I saw so many young people in my generation not getting into a lot of these investment vehicles that were guaranteed to give them the kind of lives they would hope for, or so I thought. But as I studied the economy more and understood the situation more, I recognized that, yes, that is almost guaranteed the solution for most young people is to buy a home and own it, buy investment properties and rent them out so you have cash flow. The problem is that even if you're doing exceptionally well for yourself, whether it's in real estate or in any other realm of our economy, what we're doing is leaving an economy for our children that is guaranteed to be harder than it was for us today. The same way that our economy is much harder than it was for our parents and then for our grandparents. So the solution is that whether you fall politically on the left or the right, one of the unifying aspects politically of our society and of our generation must be to end the Federal Reserve, to end the ability of our government not to print money, because the Federal Reserve is not our government. The Federal Reserve prints money to loan to our government at interest. The problem with this is that as a taxpayer, you individually owe $250,000. And that number is only growing because the politicians have no problem spending your money and your kids' money while they make ungodly money that we don't even know where it's coming from, much more than their salaries. You don't have to be a financial guru to understand that if you are $250,000 in debt, as the average American is when we take into account the national debt, and you make $50,000 a year, as the average American does, there's almost no situation that would be wise to spend more money on credit. To you, I might just be some realtor in Miami. But if, like me, you understand that it isn't the natural course of things that things just get more expensive over time, if, like me, you believe that opportunity and prosperity can be created through the right actions and limited by certain actions, then I hope you'll give me a like and a follow, because I'm only going to talk about this more as time goes on. And I think we can all agree that printing money, borrowing money at interest, is never going to be the answer. And the only way we can get money out of politics and out of the large, institutional, highly corrupt industries that we have today is to stop printing money and giving it to them and letting you pay the bill.